My coach called my cousin the Mute. After he fell during a race with blood on his knee, he said, "Now I have a good reason to cut the Mute from my team." When he asked him why he hated him so much, he smirked and said, "You embarrass me." He didn't say a word. That was 8 weeks ago. Yesterday, he saw my cousin's name on the state qualifier board and went completely still. My cousin Aiden had a mild speech disorder and some processing delays, and sometimes repeats phrases to self-soothe when he gets overwhelmed. This has been very challenging for him, especially in school, but not track. He's one of the most dedicated athletes I've ever seen, and if you saw him run, you would understand why we always said his legs speak for him. Aiden spent most of his school years in special ed, but finally transferred to our public high school last year. The administration pushed for it, saying it would help him socialize more, and that he could finally join the track team. We were cautious but excited. My aunt spent weeks helping him prep. He memorized bus schedules, practiced locker combinations, even rehearsed how to ask to use the bathroom. Everything turned out well. The head coach, Ms. Jameson, paired him with a student mentor who made cue cards just for him, and Aiden crushed the 5K trials. He made varsity in 3 weeks, and the older guys on the team started calling him the Machine. Then Ms. Jameson left for maternity leave, and the assistant coach, Mr. Dwyer, took over. On his first day, he told the whole team things were going to tighten up. Everyone had to meet his standards, no exceptions. He started by calling Aiden out in front of the team. "You don't need cue cards, you need to listen." Then he took away the visual aids the student mentor had approved and told Aiden to keep up or get left behind. The next week, he made Aiden run an entire set of bleacher drills twice because he was slow to respond. When my aunt emailed him, he said Aiden needed real-world expectations. The principal said something about letting the new coach find his footing. I started showing up to practice when I could to watch everything that was happening. Aiden started timing his runs slower. He flinched more, and his old nervous tick of rubbing his fingers together came back. But the worst thing was that he stopped looking up. Aiden always made eye contact when he was proud. Now he refused to meet my eyes. I noticed other changes too. The walls of his bedroom, once covered with track meet photos and running posters, gradually became bare as he took things down one by one. At home, he started spending more time in his room with the door closed. We used to hear him running in the morning, but even that became less frequent. My aunt would make his favorite meals, but his plate would remain mostly full. The light that had sparked in him was dimming, and we all saw it happening but felt powerless to stop it. Then came the regional qualifiers. Aiden's 10K time was second best in the district, so much so that on paper there was no way to deny him a slot at the meet. But Dwyer tried anyway at a meeting my aunt attended to defend Aiden. He said he was worried about performance under pressure. My aunt brought stats, emails, even a note from Ms. Jameson supporting his placement. It was so overwhelming the school overruled Dwyer, so Aiden made it to regionals. "Fine," he had said, "but when he freezes up out there, that's on you, not me." The night before the race, I picked Aiden up from practice and he typed something in his phone and showed it to me. "Do I have to go?" Read his message. I asked why he was asking that. He typed, "He said if I mess up, I'm off the team." I wanted to turn the car around and drag Dwyer out of that gym myself, but I settled for reassuring Aiden that he had earned his pot, and whatever happened, we had his back. The next day, my aunt and I showed up with signs that said, "Go Machine, run your race." The bleachers were packed. I saw Dwyer pacing the sidelines with a clipboard. Aiden stood with the team stretching. Then I saw Dwyer pull him aside right before the race. I couldn't hear everything, but I was close enough to catch the end. "If you embarrass me out there, you're done. Do you understand?" Aiden looked calm on the outside, but I saw him rubbing his fingers together. I could tell he was retreating into himself, building walls to keep his anxiety away. When he finished speaking, he gave Aiden a pat on the back that was more of a shove, sending him stumbling slightly forward before he caught himself. When the race started, Aiden was steady, but around lap 3, someone dropped a water bottle near the track and the sound made him twitch. Lap 4, he began rubbing his fingers and his strides got erratic. Dwyer yelled from the sideline, "Push through it!" Lap 5, he tripped and a collective gasp rose from the crowd. Then I saw the red of blood on his knee and elbow. No one moved at first, but Dwyer seemed pleased and I heard him say, "Now I have good reason to cut the Mute from my team." The words hit me like a physical blow. The casual cruelty, the deliberate dehumanization of my cousin, it was breathtaking in its malice. This wasn't tough coaching or pushing an athlete to excel. This was targeted abuse of a vulnerable student by someone in a position of authority. Dwyer's expression as he watched Aiden struggle to continue was one of satisfaction rather than concern. He made no move to check on his injured athlete, offered no encouragement or support. Instead, he continued making notes on his clipboard, occasionally glancing at his stopwatch with a smirk that made my blood boil. The remaining laps were a testament to Aiden's determination rather than his athletic ability. His form was compromised by pain and the psychological impact of the fall. Blood trickled down his leg from his injured knee, leaving faint marks on the track with each step. His breathing was labored, his pace significantly slower than his qualifying times. Yet he continued. Each step seemed to require conscious effort, each lap an exercise in pure willpower. The crowd, recognizing his struggle, began to cheer specifically for him, not the polite encouragement of earlier, but genuine support for his refusal to quit. Parents from other schools joined in, creating a wave of positive energy that seemed to carry him forward when his body wanted to stop. I watched Aiden finish the race, his face a mask of pain and determination, and knew something had to change. The aftermath was immediate and intense. Aiden's aunt filed a formal complaint that same day, with my detailed documentation of Dwyer's behavior attached. The school administration, finally recognizing the severity of the situation, placed Dwyer on administrative leave pending investigation. Ms. Jameson, hearing what had happened, volunteered to return early from maternity leave to take over the team. The hours following the race were a blur of activity. As soon as Aiden crossed the finish line, last in his heat but upright and moving under his own power, we rushed to meet him. The medical tent was our first stop, where a volunteer nurse cleaned and bandaged his injuries. The antiseptic smell mixed with the metallic scent of blood as she worked, her movements efficient but gentle. Aiden sat silently on the examination table, his eyes fixed on a point in the distance, his body trembling slightly from adrenaline crash and pain. My aunt's face was a study in controlled fury as she helped Aiden change into clean clothes, careful to avoid his bandaged elbow and knee. Her movements were measured, her voice soft as she spoke to him, but I could see the rage building behind her calm exterior. When Aiden was settled in a chair with a sports drink and an ice pack, she turned to me. "I need you to tell me exactly what you heard Dwyer say," she said, her voice low and intense, word for word. I recounted everything: the threat before the race, the continuous shouting during Aiden's struggle, and finally, the damning statement about cutting the mute from the team. With each detail, my aunt's expression hardened, her lips pressing into a thin line, her hands clenching and unclenching at her sides. "Stay with him," she instructed, pulling her phone from her purse. "I'm calling Principal Winters right now." She stepped outside the medical tent, but I could still hear fragments of her conversation, terms like discrimination, hostile environment, and legal action, cutting through the ambient noise of the meet continuing around us. When she returned, her face was flushed but composed. "The principal wants to meet us at the school in an hour," she informed me. "I need you to write down everything you witnessed, as detailed as possible. Dates, times, exact quotes if you can remember them." The school parking lot was nearly empty when we arrived, most staff having left for the weekend. Principal Winters met us at the main entrance, his face grave as he unlocked the door. The hallways were eerily quiet, our footsteps echoing off the lockers lining the walls. The smell of industrial cleaner hung in the air, mixed with the faint mustiness that seems inherent to all school buildings. The meeting in Winters' office was tense but productive. My aunt presented our documentation methodically, my written account of Dwyer's behavior, screenshots of emails she had sent expressing concerns about his coaching methods, even a voice recording from a parent who had overheard similar comments at a previous meet. The principal's expression grew increasingly troubled as the evidence mounted. "This is concerning," he admitted, removing his glasses to rub the bridge of his nose. "Very concerning." "Concerning isn't the word I'd use," my aunt replied, her voice steady but cold. "It's discriminatory, it's abusive, and it's potentially illegal under the Americans with Disabilities Act." The mention of legal implications seemed to galvanize Winters into action. By the end of the meeting, he had committed to placing Dwyer on immediate administrative leave pending a full investigation. He also promised to contact Ms. Jameson about returning early to take over the team. "I want to assure you that we take these allegations very seriously," he said as we prepared to leave. "This is not what our school stands for." My aunt fixed him with a level gaze. "With all due respect, Principal Winters, what your school stands for will be determined by your actions now, not your words." The drive home was quiet, Aiden dozing in the back seat, exhausted from the physical and emotional ordeal of the day. The setting sun cast long shadows across the road, the golden light a stark contrast to the darkness of the day's events. My aunt drove with both hands gripping the steering wheel, her posture rigid, her focus intense. "Do you think they'll actually do anything?" I asked quietly, careful not to wake Aiden. She glanced at me briefly before returning her attention to the road. "They will," she said with quiet certainty, "because if they don't, I'll make sure everyone in this district knows exactly what kind of man they have coaching their children." Aiden's physical wounds healed quickly, the scrapes on his knee and elbow scabbed over within days, but the emotional damage ran deeper. For weeks after the incident, he remained withdrawn, his confidence shattered. He still went to practice, still ran his drills, but the joy was gone from his movements. He ran like someone fulfilling an obligation, not someone pursuing a passion. The physical healing process was visible and straightforward. Each day, the angry red of his scrapes faded slightly, the scabs gradually shrinking until they flaked away, leaving behind new pink skin that would eventually blend with the surrounding tissue. My aunt carefully cleaned and rebandaged the wounds each night, applying antibiotic ointment with gentle fingers, murmuring encouragement as she worked. But the emotional healing was less linear, marked by good days and bad progress and setbacks. Some mornings, Aiden would rise early for a run, his movements purposeful as he laced up his shoes and filled his water bottle. Other days, he would remain in bed long past his usual waking time, responding to gentle prompting with only minimal acknowledgement. Ms. Jameson noticed it too. She approached me after practice one day, her newborn sleeping against her chest in a carrier. "How is he really doing?" she asked quietly, watching Aiden methodically pack his gear. The baby slept peacefully, tiny fingers curled into fists, completely unaware of the conversation happening above her. Ms. Jameson looked tired but determined, the dark circles under her eyes testament to the challenges of balancing new motherhood with her return to coaching. Her hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and she wore comfortable athletic clothes that accommodated both her postpartum body and the baby carrier. "Not great," I admitted. "He's going through the motions, but it's like he's afraid to fully commit, afraid of what might happen if he lets himself care again." She nodded thoughtfully. "Trauma does that, makes you protect yourself by disconnecting, but he's stronger than Dwyer ever understood. He'll find his way back." The practice field looked different with Ms. Jameson back at the helm. The tension that had permeated the air under Dwyer's leadership was gone, replaced by a focused but supportive atmosphere. She had reinstated Aiden's visual aids, even expanding the system to benefit other runners who responded well to visual cues. Her coaching style was firm but kind, demanding excellence while acknowledging individual needs and challenges. The baby stirred slightly, making soft snuffling sounds against her mother's chest. Ms. Jameson adjusted the carrier straps with practiced ease, her attention momentarily diverted to her child before returning to our conversation. "Give him time," she advised, her voice gentle but confident. "And keep showing up. Consistency matters more than you know right now." The turning point came unexpectedly. About a month after the regional meet, Ms. Jameson had organized a friendly competition with a neighboring school. Low pressure, no official records, just a chance for the runners to test themselves in a supportive environment. Aiden initially didn't want to participate, but his aunt gently encouraged him. "Just go," she told him. "You don't even have to run if you don't feel like it, but be there with your team." The morning of the meet dawned clear and mild, perfect running weather. Sunlight filtered through the kitchen thin blinds, creating patterns on the table where Aiden sat, methodically eating a bowl of oatmeal. His movements were precise, each spoonful following the same path from bowl to mouth, his expression neutral as he chewed. My aunt moved around the kitchen with forced cheerfulness, packing his bag with extra water bottles, energy bars, and a clean towel. Her voice was deliberately light as she reviewed the day's schedule, reminding him that this was just a practice meet, that there was no pressure to perform. "And remember," she said, zipping his bag closed, "I'll be there to pick you up whenever you're ready to leave. Just text me." Aiden nodded, rising to rinse his bowl in the sink. His movements were economical, efficient, devoid of the nervous energy that had characterized him before Dwyer's coaching, but also lacking the enthusiasm he'd once shown for competition days. I drove him to the meet and watched from the stands as the teams warmed up. Aiden stayed on the periphery, going through his stretches mechanically. Then something remarkable happened. One of the freshman runners, a skinny kid named Tyler who had joined the team after Dwyer left, approached Aiden with obvious nervousness. The school where the friendly meet was being held was smaller than ours, with more modest facilities but a well-maintained track. The bleachers were only half filled, creating a more intimate atmosphere than the regional competition. Parents chatted casually, coaches from both schools discussed their runners with professional camaraderie, and officials moved about without the urgency of a qualifying meet. I sat midway up the bleachers, close enough to observe but not so close as to make Aiden feel watched. The metal seat was cool beneath me, the morning sun not yet high enough to warm it. A light breeze carried the scent of fresh-cut grass and the distant aroma of coffee from the small concession stand near the entrance. Aiden had positioned himself at the far end of the warm-up area, going through his stretching routine with mechanical precision. His face remained impassive as he moved from one stretch to the next, his eyes focused on the ground rather than on his teammates or the competition. He wore his team uniform, the navy and gold colors bright against his skin, but something about his posture made him seem separate from the group, as if an invisible barrier existed between him and the other runners. The freshman who approached him, Tyler, was new to the team, having joined after the upheaval caused by Dwyer's departure. He was slight in build, with a shock of red hair and freckles scattered across his nose and cheeks. His uniform hung loosely on his frame, suggesting he hadn't yet grown into his runner's body. As he made his way toward Aiden, his nervousness was evident in his halting steps, and the way he repeatedly adjusted his bib number. Aiden?" I could just barely hear him from where I sat. "Coach Jameson said you might be able to help me with my starting position. I keep losing time on the blocks." Aiden looked startled, then uncertain. He glanced toward Ms. Jameson, who gave him an encouraging nod. Slowly, he took out his phone and typed something, showing it to Tyler. From my position, I couldn't read the screen, but Tyler's reaction was immediate and positive. His face brightened, tension visibly leaving his shoulders as he read whatever advice Aiden had offered. "Could you show me?" he asked, and Aiden did. For the next 10 minutes, I watched as my cousin patiently demonstrated proper starting technique, adjusting Tyler's form with gentle taps on his shoulder or knee to indicate where changes were needed. When Tyler finally got it right, Aiden actually smiled, a small, tentative smile, but real. The transformation was subtle, but unmistakable. As Aiden demonstrated the proper stance, his own body seemed to remember its purpose. His movements became more fluid, more natural, the mechanical quality giving way to the graceful efficiency that had once characterized his running. He positioned Tyler's arms with careful precision, showing rather than telling, his own form exemplary as he demonstrated the explosive start that had once been his signature. Ms. Jameson approached them, clipboard in hand. "Tyler, you're in the first heat of the 200. Why don't you try out that new start?" Tyler nodded eagerly, then turned to Aiden. "Will you watch? Tell me if I'm doing it right?" Something shifted in Aiden's expression, a flicker of purpose, of connection. He nodded. When the meet began, Aiden didn't run in his usual events. Instead, he stood with Ms. Jameson, observing each race with intense focus. After Tyler's heat, which he didn't win, but where his start was noticeably improved, Aiden actually sought out the freshman to give him feedback, typing rapidly on his phone. The change in Aiden's demeanor was remarkable. As he showed Tyler the screen, his posture was open, engaged, his eyes making direct contact rather than avoiding it. When Tyler nodded in understanding, Aiden's satisfaction was evident in the slight straightening of his shoulders, the momentary relaxation of the tension that had become his constant companion. By the end of the meet, Aiden had helped 3 different runners with their technique. I watched him become more animated with each interaction, his movements becoming more fluid, more natural. When Ms. Jameson asked if he wanted to run in the final relay, he hesitated only briefly before nodding. The relay was the final event of the day, a 4x400, that would include runners from both schools mixed together to create balanced teams. The competitive element remained, but the emphasis was clearly on participation and enjoyment rather than winning. Ms. Jameson assigned Aiden to the third leg of his team, positioning him between a senior from our school and a junior from the host school. I held my breath as he took his position for the third leg of the 4x400. When the baton was passed to him, he took off with a burst of speed that reminded me of the old Aiden, the one who ran for the pure joy of feeling his body in motion. He wasn't the fastest on the team that day, but he ran with heart, with presence. When he passed the baton to the anchor runner, the look on his face wasn't relief that his part was over, it was satisfaction at having done his best. His stride as he ran was a revelation, fluid, powerful, efficient. His arms pumped in perfect rhythm with his legs, his head position ideal, his breathing controlled and measured. For those brief moments as he circled the track, he was fully present in his body, fully engaged in the act of running. The sensory issues, the processing delays, the anxiety all seemed temporarily suspended as he moved with the natural grace that had once earned him the nickname, the Machine. When he handed off the baton to the anchor runner, The momentary connection, the slap of the metal against palm, the brief eye contact, the synchronized movement seemed to symbolize his reconnection to the sport and to his team. As he slowed to a jog and then a walk, his breathing heavy but controlled, I could see that something fundamental had shifted. After the meet, as we walked to my car, Aiden typed out a message and showed it to me. "I think I want to try the 5K at the next meet." "Yeah?" I couldn't keep the hope out of my voice. "You sure?" He nodded, then typed again, "Ms. Jamison says I still have the best form on the team." "She's right," I said, feeling a lump in my throat. "You always have." The parking lot was emptying as we made our way to my car, the afternoon sun warm on our backs. Other runners called out goodbyes, parents loaded equipment into trunks, coaches exchanged final observations. The ordinary end to an ordinary meet, except that for Aiden, it represented something extraordinary, a step back toward himself. The healing wasn't instant or complete. There were still bad days when the memories of Dwyer's cruelty would resurface, days when Aiden would retreat into silence or struggle with his confidence. But there were more and more good days too, days when he'd voluntarily join team study sessions, or stay late to help younger runners with their technique, days when I'd catch him looking at college brochures with track programs, or researching running scholarships online. The bad days were still difficult to witness. Sometimes a sudden noise, a door slamming, a whistle blowing unexpectedly, would trigger a visible flinch, a momentary retreat into the protective shell he had developed under Dwyer's regime. Certain phrases or tones of voice could cause him to tense up, his fingers immediately beginning that familiar rubbing pattern. On these days, his running would revert to the mechanical quality it had taken on during his worst times, technically correct, but devoid of joy or natural flow. But these episodes became less frequent and less intense as time passed. The support system around him, family, teammates, Ms. Jamison, created a safety net that allowed him to take risks again, to invest emotionally in his running without fear of devastating consequences. The good days began to outnumber the bad. I would arrive to pick him up from practice and find him engaged in animated, if one-sided, conversations with teammates, his phone serving as his voice but his body language speaking volumes about his growing comfort and confidence. He began to join team social events again, pizza parties after meets, study sessions before exams, even a movie night that the seniors organized as an end-of-season celebration. Ms. Jamison was instrumental in his recovery, creating an environment where Aiden's differences were treated as strengths rather than liabilities. She reinstated his visual aids and expanded them for the whole team, finding that many runners benefited from the clear, sequential instructions. She paired Aiden with different teammates for drills, helping him build relationships beyond just running together. Her coaching style was a study in effective leadership, firm but flexible, demanding excellence while acknowledging individual needs. The visual aids she developed became a standard part of practice, with laminated cards showing proper form for different events posted around the track. She implemented a buddy system for warm-ups and cool-downs, ensuring that no runner was isolated during these crucial parts of training. Most importantly, she gave him responsibilities that validated his knowledge and experience. By the time the state qualifiers rolled around 3 months later, Aiden was unofficially serving as an assistant coach for the distance runners. His tactical understanding of pacing and form, recognized and respected by teammates and coaches alike. The transformation in the team dynamic was remarkable. Under Dwyer, competition between teammates had been cutthroat, with runners afraid to show weakness or ask for help. With Ms. Jamison's leadership and Aiden's emerging role as a peer mentor, collaboration became the norm. Runners shared strategies, offered encouragement, celebrated each other's improvements regardless of placement. Aiden's unique perspective became valued rather than dismissed. His methodical approach to training, his attention to technical details, his ability to break complex movements into component parts, all qualities related to his processing style, were recognized as assets to the team. Younger runners sought him out for advice, and even seniors began to respect his insights. The day of the state qualifier, I arrived early to find Aiden already on the track, not running but walking the course methodically, making mental notes about the terrain. When he saw me, he actually waved a small gesture that would have been unremarkable for most people, but represented enormous progress for him. The qualifying meet was held at a university track, the facility's professional grade and impressive. The red surface of the track contrasted sharply with the lush green of the infield, both gleaming in the morning sunlight. Officials in crisp white shirts moved with purpose, checking equipment and marking lanes. Teams from across the state gathered in designated areas, their different colored uniforms creating a vibrant mosaic against the backdrop of the stadium. Aiden's methodical examination of the course was typical of his analytical approach to running. He walked each curve, occasionally crouching to feel the surface with his fingertips, his expression one of intense concentration. He made notes on his phone, likely recording observations about the track's firmness, the angle of the curves, the optimal positioning for different parts of the race. "Checking out the competition?" I asked as I approached. He shook his head and typed, "Visualizing. Ms. Jamison taught me. Run the race in your mind before you run it with your body." The concept made perfect sense for Aiden, whose processing style had always been visual and sequential. By mentally rehearsing each segment of the race, he could prepare for the transitions and challenges, reducing the cognitive load during the actual event. I watched him compete that day with a mixture of pride and awe. This wasn't the same boy who had crumbled under Dwyer's pressure. This was an athlete who knew his worth, who understood his strengths and had strategies for his challenges. He qualified for the state championship with a personal best time, crossing the finish line with his head up, making eye contact with his teammates as they surrounded him in celebration. His race was a masterclass in strategic running. He started conservatively, positioning himself in the middle of the pack for the first few laps. With 200 meters to go, he moved into third. With 100 meters remaining, he passed the second-place runner on the inside, his form still clean despite the increased pace. He crossed the finish line in second place, his time a personal best by nearly 15 seconds. The celebration that followed was spontaneous and joyful. His teammates surrounded him, offering high fives and congratulations. Ms. Jamison hugged him briefly, her pride evident in her wide smile smile and the thumbs up she gave to my aunt in the stands. Even runners from other schools approached to acknowledge his performance, recognizing the technical excellence of his race. Later that evening as we drove home, Aiden showed me his phone with a new message typed out, "I want to put my posters back up." The simple statement carried profound meaning. The bare walls of his bedroom had been a visual representation of his withdrawal, his disconnection from the sport that had once defined him. The decision to restore the posters signaled his readiness to reclaim not just his identity as a runner, but his right to take pride in that identity. "I'll help you," I promised. "We'll get them all back up tonight." We stopped at a craft store on the way home to buy new mounting putty, since the old adhesive had lost its stickiness. The store was bright and crowded, filled with the scent of artificial flowers and scented candles. Aiden navigated the aisles with purpose, selecting exactly what he needed without hesitation. At the checkout, he handed his selection to the cashier and made eye contact as he paid small actions that would have been challenging for him just months earlier. At home, we worked together in comfortable silence, carefully positioning each poster to recreate the gallery that had once covered his walls. The posters had been stored flat in his closet, preserved in perfect condition: Olympic runners in mid-stride, motivational quotes about perseverance, photos from previous meets where Aiden had placed or set personal records. As we hung the last poster, a new one from the qualifying meet that day, Aiden stepped back to survey his room. The walls were once again covered with images of runners in motion, of finish lines crossed, of medals earned. His medals and ribbons hung from a special rack his uncle had made, catching the light as they swayed slightly. The transformation of the room mirrored Aiden's own journey from the stripped-down emptiness of his darkest period to the vibrant, purposeful space it had become again. The posters weren't just decorations, they were affirmations, visual reminders of his identity and aspirations. Aiden typed one more message before I left. "Thank you for not giving up on me." I hugged him then, something he didn't always welcome but seemed to need in that moment. "Never," I said. "That's not what family does." The state championship was held 2 weeks later at a university track about 2 hours away. The whole family went to support Aiden. My aunt and uncle, my parents, even my grandparents drove in from out of state. We made signs, wore team colors, and arrived early to get good seats. The morning of the championship dawned clear and cool, perfect running weather. We left before sunrise, the sky gradually lightening from black to deep blue to the soft pink and gold of dawn as we drove. My aunt had packed a cooler with healthy snacks and drinks, anticipating a long day at the track. The car was filled with nervous energy conversations starting and stopping. Radio stations changed frequently, everyone a little too loud and a little too cheerful. The university campus was impressive, sprawling green lawns, stately brick buildings, and a state-of-the-art athletic complex that included the track where the championships would be held. The parking lots were already filling when we arrived, cars from across the state disgorging families in school colors, carrying coolers, blankets, and homemade signs. The atmosphere was electric, with teams from across the state warming up on the track. I spotted Aiden with his teammates going through their pre-race routines. He looked focused but calm, occasionally nodding as Ms. Jameson gave last-minute instructions. We secured seats in the middle section of the home side bleachers, spreading blankets to mark our territory, and setting up our signs where they would be visible from the track. My grandparents, not used to the hard metal seats, brought cushions that my grandfather insisted on positioning just so, much to the amusement of nearby spectators. The morning events proceeded with the efficiency of a well-organized meet sprints, hurdles, field events all running according to schedule. The announcer's voice boomed over the loudspeakers, providing updates on results and calling the next groups of athletes to their events. The smell of sunscreen mingled with the aroma of hot dogs and popcorn from the concession stands, creating the distinctive olfactory backdrop of outdoor sporting events. His event, the 5,000 meters, was scheduled for mid-afternoon. As the time approached, the announcer called the runners to the starting line. Aiden took his position, adjusting his stance slightly. From the stands, I could see him taking deep breaths, centering himself. The 5,000 meters 12.5 laps of the 400-meter track was one of the most tactically complex events in track and field. It required not just physical endurance but strategic thinking, pacing awareness, and the mental toughness to push through the inevitable pain of sustained effort. Aiden looked different from the other runners as they took their positions at the starting line. Not physically, his lean runner's build was typical of distance athletes, but in his demeanor. While some bounced nervously on their toes or shook out their arms, Aiden stood perfectly still, his focus complete, his breathing measured and controlled. The stillness wasn't from anxiety, but from concentration. He was already running the race in his mind, as he had explained to me at the qualifiers. The starting gene fired, its sharp crack echoing across the field. The race began with the controlled chaos typical of long-distance events, runners jostling for position before settling into their pace. Aiden started conservatively, positioning himself in the middle of the pack for the first few laps. His form was perfect, economical, smooth, no wasted motion. From the bleachers, he looked like any other elite runner, focused, determined, in his element. The first lap passed without incident. Aiden maintained his position, neither gaining nor losing ground. His breathing appeared regulated, his form textbook perfect. The crowd cheered as the runners completed the circuit, the volume rising and falling like waves breaking on shore. The announcer's voice provided updates on the leaders' pace, noting that they were on track for impressive times. By the fourth lap, the field had begun to stretch out, with clear leaders emerging and others falling back. Aiden remained in the middle, his pace steady, his form unchanged, despite the increasing fatigue that must have been building. His face showed no emotion, just intense concentration on the task at hand. Around lap 8, he began to make his move. It wasn't dramatic, no sudden burst of speed, no obvious strategy shift, just a gradual increase in pace that allowed him to pass one runner, then another. By lap 10, he had moved into 5th position, still running with the same controlled efficiency that had characterized his entire race. The crowd was on their feet, cheering wildly. My aunt was screaming his name, my uncle was recording everything on his phone, and I was clutching the railing so hard my knuckles turned white. The final lap brought the drama that makes track and field so compelling. The leader had established a significant gap and seemed uncatchable. The second and third place runners were battling each other, trading positions with each curve. Aiden, still in 4th, was closing the gap but running out of track. Coming into the final final straightaway, Aiden made his move. With a burst of speed that seemed impossible after 12 laps, he surged past the second-place runner and closed in on first. They crossed the finish line almost simultaneously, so close that we couldn't tell who had won. The moment stretched into an eternity as we waited for the official results. The crowd noise dimmed to a murmur of anticipation, all eyes on the scoreboard. Officials huddled near the finish line, reviewing the electronic timing data. Aiden stood bent over, hands on knees, recovering from his final sprint, seemingly unaware of the drama unfolding around him. We held our breath, waiting for the official results. When they flashed on the scoreboard, we erupted in cheers. Second place by just 0.2 of a second. Aiden had won the silver medal at the state championship. His teammates mobbed him at the finish line, lifting him onto their shoulders despite his obvious embarrassment. Ms. Jameson was crying and laughing at the same time, and when they finally set him down, Aiden looked up at the stands, found our family, and gave us a smile and a thumbs up. The medal ceremony took place on a podium set up near the finish line. Aiden stood on the second highest platform, flanked by the gold medalist, a senior from a school in the northern part of the state, and the bronze medalist, a junior from a private academy known for its running program. All three athletes showed the physical effects of their effort: flushed faces, sweat-dampened uniforms, the slight trembling of muscles pushed to their limits. When the silver medal was placed around Aiden's neck, a cheer went up from our section of the bleachers. My aunt was crying openly now, my uncle's arm around her shoulders. My grandparents stood proudly, their faces beaming with pride. Even my usually stoic father was grinning widely, clapping with enthusiasm. In that moment, watching my cousin being celebrated for exactly who he was, I realized something important. This wasn't just about winning a race or defeating a bully. It was about Aiden finding his voice not just through words, but through his actions, his perseverance, and his quiet strength. After the medal ceremony, we met Aiden outside the stadium. He was still in his uniform, silver medal hanging around his neck. For once, he didn't need his phone to communicate. He simply walked up to my aunt and hugged her tight, then did the same with each of us in turn. The embrace was unexpected and powerful, Aiden initiating physical contact, expressing emotion without technology as an intermediary. My aunt held him longer than the others, her tears dampening his uniform, her words of pride muffled against his shoulder. My uncle joined the hug, his large hand patting Aiden's back with gentle affection. My grandparents waited their turn, my grandmother fussing over his hair and the scrape on his elbow from a fall during warm-ups, my grandfather offering a firm handshake that turned into an awkward but heartfelt hug. The drive home was filled with a different energy than the morning journey, not the nervous anticipation of before, but the satisfied exhaustion that follows achievement. Aiden sat in the back seat with me, his medal carefully placed in its presentation box, his uniform exchanged for comfortable sweats and a team t-shirt. The setting sun cast a golden glow through the windows, illuminating his profile as he gazed out at the passing landscape. On the drive home, exhausted but happy, Aiden typed one last message and showed it to me. "Thank you for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself." I smiled at my cousin state silver medalist, team co-captain, and the strongest person I knew. "Always," I told him. "That's what family does." The message was simple but profound, acknowledging both his journey and the support system that had helped him navigate it. The screen of his phone glowed softly in the dimming light of the car interior, the words a testament to his growth not just as an athlete, but as a person who understood the value of connection and support. As we continued toward home, Aiden leaned his head against the window, his eyes closing as exhaustion finally overtook him. The silver medal rested in its box on his lap, his hand protectively covering it even in sleep. In that moment of vulnerability and triumph, I saw both versions of my cousin, the one who had struggled and the one who had overcome, inseparable parts of the same remarkable person. The car hummed along the highway, carrying us home through the gathering darkness, the day's events already transforming from experience to memory. But some things would remain unchanged: the medal that would join others on Aiden's wall, the respect he had earned from teammates and competitors alike, and most importantly, the knowledge that his voice, whether expressed through words, technology, or the powerful language of his running, deserved to be heard.